Welcome, old viewers and new viewers, to another episode of The Dancing Negotiator with Dr. Cheryl Okoli, DHA. This is the show where you learn all about conflict and its resolution strategies: the what, the why, the when, the where, the who. And I also introduce useful evidence-based frameworks that are salient to the conversation at hand. I like to reserve the third Fridays of each month for story time, which is basically an analysis of a drama, a movie, or story. What went wrong as it pertains to conflict and what could have been done better. The last Friday is reserved to have a guest. So yes, today I will have a guest and I will introduce her shortly. As you know, each month we have a theme, and the theme for this month of April and the month of May is all about the business of healthcare. So today we'll be talking a little bit about the financials of the business of healthcare by discussing the 4 Ps of social marketing. But before we do that, I have a few questions I would like you to reflect on. But before we talk about the 4 Ps of social marketing, did you know it was actually created by a professor, a marketing professor? His name was Edmund McCarthy. He was a Notre Dame marketing professor. So here are some questions for you to reflect on, please. Can you think of a time, either in the workplace or in your personal life, when you had to sell or promote something or a service? How did you feel about that? Were you comfortable? What were the hindrances? As you reflect upon that, right now, I'm going to introduce our guest, Alice Wheaton. She's a Canadian, and actually she's returning. She's a returning guest. I will introduce her first with her bio. And I love this specific bio from her book. And her book is actually called How the Top 10% Do It: Sales Secrets of Elite and Top Performers. So I read, has always been a front runner who thrives on challenge and change. She went from being a critical care nurse to being hired at Xerox Canada in Toronto without any prior business experience. She won the prestigious President's Club Award and was the top salesperson for her team, with 198% achievement in her first year. Alice was assigned the responsibility of training new recruits, and it was this opportunity that inspired her to develop the skills to speak into the lives of others, to help fast-track their personal and corporate success. Her proven record of accomplishments in sales, marketing, and leadership provide Alice with the unique ability to recognize how to help others outperform expectations so that they easily gain the next promotion. So before I introduce her, I just want to mention one thing. I did say we're talking about the 4 Ps of social marketing, which are place, product, price, and promotion. We won't focus too much on the place, but just think, when you think of real estate, location, location, location. So in the same token, whatever your business is or service is, think of the right place for it. So not much ado, Alice, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me again. Appreciate it.
Excellent. So what would you say are your 3 biggest challenges in promoting self or service?
That's a really good question. The biggest challenge is that sales has not been seen as a definable career. So if you wanted to be an accountant, there's a whole 4 years of education. If you wanted to be a doctor, there's a process. If you want to be a nurse, there's a process. If you want to be a teacher, there's a process. Everything is measured and it's done according to the competencies of that profession. But sales as no such, sales in and of itself means that anybody can walk in off the street and call themselves a salesperson. And oftentimes what happens is they say, oh, I can, I'm a good talker. I can, really relate to people. And that's pretty fine in some ways, but ultimately, the job of the salesperson is to really understand what the needs and conditions and constraints are about doing business with them. And salespeople don't dive into that because they're so busy trying to quotation mark build relationships.
Okay.
And Cheryl, I have asked many of my clients if they want a relationship with me or if they want me to provide the knowledge and the skills to help their salespeople sell more. And without fail, they say the latter. Customers did not wake up today really lonely and down a few friends and hope that a salesperson calls them. And yet salespeople show up. I say they show up and throw up, meaning they show up and talk.
So what are those 3 challenges? If you were to number them, what would you say are the biggest challenges in promoting self or service? Like for you specifically, if you were to promote yourself and service, what do you think might be the biggest challenges, the 3 biggest challenges?
Well, the absolute biggest one by a long stretch is the ability to get in touch in front of a meeting with the person who can say yes. And I prefer to deal with clients who can say yes just with a handshake. And those, if someone can say yes with a handshake, then I know that I'm talking to the right person. Now, if I'm talking to someone who's a manager or a human resources person, there's no way that they can make a decision. They've got to take your message and then take it forward, but then they're probably not salespeople.
So when you said, keep going.
And so given that the person you spoke with is not a salesperson, you're trusting that person to do the deal for you. But if most salespeople talk 4 minutes out of 5, and they should be only talking 1 minute out of 5 and listening for 4.
Okay, so what other challenges do you see in promotion of self or service?
And so the first one, that one is that lack of skills. The second one, which is huge, it's huge for everyone, but it's fear. It's the inability to manage their own emotions and feelings.
Wow, elaborate, please.
Well, we're born with a little tiny gland at the back of our brain called the amygdala. And its sole purpose is to cause us to feel fear because it's nature's way of protecting us from being, eaten by saber-toothed tigers or whatever. And so, and so without that fear, we would be dead. And so when we are faced with the possibility of rejection, fear steps in and says, oh no, if you do that, they're going to yell at you. If you do that, you're going to be rejected. If you do this, you're going to whatever. And so when salespeople get in front of clients, then they talk nonstop as a way of mitigating their own fear.
That's true. I think we can all attest to doing that, not just in the sales world, but in life in general, for some of us, right?
Yes. The expression silence is golden.
It's funny. I just find that hilarious because I remember reading a portion in your book when basically you were talking to a sales trainer, you as a consultant, and you'd said that you asked her a basic question. I'm reading, and she told you a 10-minute story.
Yes.
For you, that's problematic because when people take a long time answering what one might deem could be answered maybe in 1 or 2 minutes, you feel that it affects their credibility. So that basically was kind of like an aha moment for me, actually. So thank you.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So what are 3 keys to setting the price for your product?
Well, number 1 is how much I want to earn that year. But I mean, the thing is that when we first start out, we're innocent, right? And we're just desperate for the job. So we think we have to price it low to get the job. But I remember doing a proposal for someone. I was in Toronto working, but it was a proposal for a company in Saskatchewan. And I propose $100,000. And I thought to myself, "Huh, I'm not going to get that deal, so I may as well add another 25,000." And so I did, and I got the deal.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's a default. That was totally by default. But then what that did for me, it helped me understand this was a very brilliant person hiring me. They would not have hired me if they hadn't thought the value was there. So clearly I was undervaluing myself.
I'm so glad you used the V word, value. That's right, because I have found that amongst consultants like myself and yourself, sometimes they wonder that if they have their price way high, they will not get the demand or they won't get the clients that they want, thinking that, oh, if they were to lower it, it would create more volume. I can understand where they're coming from that, but I believe there's a fine line when you undersell yourself, and also it might affect your credibility. And I also found from what some of the discussions in being different global networks, that it's also geographical influence. So there's some countries and cultures, if you set a price so low, they will think you're not worth listening to.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, so that's very interesting. So you would say the first key to setting your price, what would you say your first key is? And then we'll carry on with the next two.
Well, the first key is it doesn't matter how much. You can't even give your services away if you're doing it to the wrong person.
True.
Right? If let's say the human resources manager does not have the ability to make a decision to say yes, then you could just give it to her. You could give it to her with $100 bonus and she still would not say yes because she's unable to.
That's right. That's right. I'm glad you went back to that because you're absolutely right. And again, that actually comes back to, we're not really talking about negotiation per se, but it's so key to know who's at the table, right? What is your decision-making power? Because number one, it helps prevent time or wasting time, right? Because from what you're just saying, if the human resources can make the decision, how many more meetings or phone calls will you need to make with that particular organization in order to acquire or set your price or sell your product, right? That's what I'm hearing.
Well, you could make 15,000 calls to people who don't have decision-making ability and you still wouldn't get the deal.
That's right. I agree.
But it's best to make, like on LinkedIn last week, there was a guy and we can talk about this, and he is billing himself as a financial engineer. And so because I work with engineering firms, he reached out to me and I said to him, I have no idea what you mean when you say financial engineer. It sounds sexy, but I have no idea what you mean. And I said, did you know that engineers create 100% of the wealth in the world, but their own personal portfolios don't reflect that? And he said, oh my God, can I use this? Can I use this with your permission? And I said, sure. So now yesterday he said, okay, this is my new tagline. And Alice Wheaton gave me this. So I like it a lot better. So it's about clarity, right? So term financial engineer, it's sort of like meow, like you have no idea what the cat is meaning when they say meow.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so it sounds like the first key will be to know your value in terms of setting your price. And then the second would be what?
Well, the second thing is to know your value, but also
no, the first was to know your value.
Yes, but the second one is, since you know your value, how does that inform you about what you charge? Do you say, oh, you know what, I want to get my foot in the door, so I'm going to go low? I've heard some people say that.
Yeah.
But the thing is that if the person you're pitching understands the outcomes and you've been able to translate those outcomes into monetary outcomes, and then they're faced with, wait, do I spend $25,000 on her and lose $500,000, or do I not hire her and lose $500,000? I mean, 25,000 with a $500,000 gain is nothing. But when we're giving a price to us, 25,000 or 250,000, whatever, seems like so much. But if we're really game changers,
Mm-hmm.
and if we really add value,
Mm-hmm.
my rule of thumb is to add 4 times the value. So if I'm going to charge $25,000 for an assignment, then I want my client to be able to measure 100,000 value.
Okay.
And so, but then I have to do that. But then I have to go back and say, so as a result of us working together, now you've landed these 4 deals. Over 5 years, how much would they be worth? Oh, they'll be worth 3 or 4 million. So then you can easily see where my value has been recouped. Yes, I can.
Return on investment.
And
Okay.
there's where your referrals come from.
Okay. ROI drives referrals is what you're saying, to some extent. Okay. So is there a third key you'd like to add? We can move on.
The third key, I hope the first one is talk to the right person. Second one, price yourself. But the third key is follow up.
Okay.
And the reason is, but not just follow up and say, hi, how are you doing? But I have a contract with someone that I will follow up with them. And like if I've presented a proposal,
Okay.
then I have a contract that we shake on that I will follow up with them in 2 days. I don't wait for them to follow up with me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I find that very interesting. So what I'm hearing you say is, so let's say you meet Mr. Smith and Mr. Smith is impressed by your resume. Well, number one, let's say that's why you met with him. And then he says to you, oh, I'm going to drop a contract. So what I'm hearing you say is, based on his words, I'm going to drop a contract. You want to wait to physically see the contract before you reach out to him? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
No, what I'm sorry, I'm missing something.
Okay, so okay. I thought I heard you say something to the effect that when you shake on a proposal, you don't wait for them, in terms of following up, rather, is what I mean.
Oh,
yes.
Oh, I almost don't need to follow up, really, because I go through a very compelling presentation. And at the end, I ask him, well, how much longer, for instance, do you want to be worried and lie awake at night after this about this issue? Well, I don't want to be. Well, why don't we start on Monday or next Monday? Well, what do you think was the perfect start date? How do you think we should roll it out? Are we going to invite some key operational managers in a meeting and tell them the new agenda? Like, so I don't want my clients to think it's a matter of just shake hands and then I get to work. It's a process, right?
Correct. Okay. So tell us about examples or instances in your work experiences, or maybe you've heard about, where there were some shady ethical practices that came to your attention, and perhaps it had to do with meeting a quota or meeting the bottom line.
Oh, that's really interesting. Actually, I was helping a client in Saskatchewan, another one in Saskatchewan, hire some people. And he was telling me about someone that was just awesome and wonderful. I'd never met him, and I was just going on what he was telling me, but I had this icky feeling come over me. And I said, it's probably based on nothing, but I just have this whatever feeling. He called me 2 days later and said, you're not going to believe this, but he was a total fraud. He was actually working for me while still working for the company in Calgary. And not only that, he had two buddies that referred to me and I hired, and all 3 of them were double dipping, 3 from me and for the original company, but they weren't doing very good work for either one of us. So,
okay, interesting.
But see, this is what happens when you're desperate, right?
I just reflect on what you're saying. And please, if I can make a request, maybe just don't mention specific locations, just in case, just maintain confidentiality and stuff. But yeah.
What do you mean location? What is Saskatchewan and Alberta a location?
It's okay. It's just I just wouldn't want anyone who perhaps might be watching this, I might know of you, I might know of the incidents, to perhaps create trouble for you, or I just wouldn't want any issues. I don't want any destructive conflict.
No, no, like, I know what happened and the client knows what happened, but nobody else does, so.
Okay, very well then. Okay, yeah, that sounds like a very difficult situation. I mean, you heard about this. So, okay, anything else you want to share about that? Or
No, I mean, all three of them eventually got fired, and they didn't have to do it. But then the original guy tried to take him to court, but he didn't have to do any payouts. But you know what the real cost was? The real cost was they were orienting these three characters. They were taking their time out. And I think it was about 2 months before they found out. So let's say you had three guys earning, I don't know, 5,000 a month. Now this client was out $15,000, right?
whoa. So that sounds to me, well, not only was there unethical practices, but it was also conflict of interest. Because when
Yeah.
you say they were double dipping, right? So interesting. Huh. So what advice would you give people in sales positions or in executive positions to maybe provide God proof, things like that from Hartman? Double dipping,
Easy.
for instance.
Easy. I have an acronym, ABP.
Okay, what's that?
Always be paranoid. Like, I am not an advocate of positive thinking,
Okay.
because positive thinking without a grounding in reality is just a fantasy.
Okay.
So I don't imagine deals done before they're done. I don't count. Kenny Rogers has got a song, something like, "Don't count your money until the dealing is done." Right?
Yes. So the same token as don't count your chickens before they're hatched. The same
Don't count
analogy.
chickens before they hatch. Don't make it, until the dealing is done. I like to say, not just everything's signed, but until I have a friend of mine who says the deal's not done until she spent the money.
Oh, okay.
But she's being facetious. But
Yeah.
the deal's not done until the money is in the bank.
Okay.
In
Okay.
my reality.
Okay.
So
Okay.
ABP, and that's the opposite of what they're talking about. You got to be positive. No, be paranoid, because shit happens.
So in terms of boundaries, I mean, there comes a point in time when one needs to be able to trust. And when there's a lack of trust, it could go to the other extremes of being paranoid. So how would you differentiate between let's see, being shrewd in an ethical way and wise, but not being paranoid to the obsession of you can't trust anybody?
I didn't say don't trust anybody, but proof. Trust, but insist on proof.
Okay. That's good for our viewers to be clear what you meant by that too. So that's good.
Yeah. So trust, trust, but like, it's true. I mean, any salesperson listening to this will know that they've gone to bed and counted their chickens, as it were, only to find out that a great big storm blew them away and there's nothing left. I mean, I once was sure I had this big giant deal, but it turns out the VP of sales got fired over the weekend. And we had to start all over again. It took another 3, 4, 6 months.
So again, not going to great details or breaching any confidentiality was the reason. Do you have any idea why the person was fired?
I don't know, because I tend not to dwell on the past. Like, when it's like, okay, next, as it were.
Okay.
But something was unethical or whatever. I don't know whether. I have no idea. And I couldn't change it, so I didn't inquire about it.
Okay. So with all your teaching background and your books and your expertise and experiences, do you incorporate, or have you been to classes where business ethics has been incorporated in the curriculum or orientation of new hires, like for your sales trainers? Because the same principles can apply in the healthcare, regardless of industry. Each industry needs to promote their service in one shape or form, right? So I'll just pause there to say, I know we have about 6 minutes left for this part of the episode, but I just wanted to hear your answer about that.
Well, first of all, when people tell me how trustworthy they are, I instantly don't believe them. And the reason is, I like to suspend belief or disbelief
Mhm.
until we have a saying where I come from in Canada, Newfoundland. It was very uneducated and it was very isolated. And there was a saying that you didn't know if anyone was trustworthy until you'd eaten 100 pounds of flour with them.
100 pounds of flour. Okay, why 100 pounds? Just because it's excessive? Is that it?
Well, I guess because that's the size of the flour sacks where flour would be delivered via a boat, and then the expression was, no, you don't know if anyone's trustworthy until you've eaten a 100-pound sack of flour with them.
So that basically means spending enough time with them, because it sounds to me to
Yeah.
take a while to finish. Okay, very
Yeah.
well done. Okay, interesting. Yeah, okay. So that's very interesting. So, sorry, so going back to the question, and I kind of just squeeze that in. So what are your thoughts about having business ethics courses or segmenting orientation for new hires? And
I would never be interested in doing this, because if you don't have ethics to begin with, you can't be trained with it.
ooh, repeat that again.
If you don't have ethics to begin with, you can't be trained to it.
Oh, that makes me chuckle, because I can hear some viewers say, really? We can debate that. But I'm not saying that I want to
Debate it if you
debate that.
want to. Debate it if you want to. But I mean, I don't think like a good ethic thing is that on Monday morning, the salesperson shows up and they give them the forecast for the week. And a lot of salespeople make up names.
Mhm.
So but they don't think that that's unethical. They just think they're saving their back from
Interesting.
being fired, right?
Yeah.
And what you might think is ethical is different. Like I'm a little bit unfriendly with my clients in a way. I ask clear questions, and I presume that they are healthy and whole and established within their own self, that if my questions make them feel at ease, that they'll cope with it.
You just hit on a very key word. You said you assume. So that makes me think, because I'm learning, and given that I have a healthcare background, we're learning that assumptions, regardless of industry, I'm learning assumptions can be very risky. It's always best to clarify and come from a perspective that what we perceive or assume we may be false. But
so how would you, so you could never say to even the worst thief in the world thinks they're ethical and they've got good conscience.
No, I'm not disputing what you're saying. I'm just being the quote unquote, I don't like to say devil's advocate, but that's kind of what I'm doing, because I can see again some come with a different perspective. So I agree with you. So it's along the same lines of some people think, is leadership innate or taught? So I'm hearing you say that you believe that if someone is inherently unethical, no amount of training or education can change that. Kind of like saying a leopard can't change his spots. That's what I kind of hear you saying, right? Yeah, interesting. Yeah, interesting perspective. Yeah. So I see we have only 2 minutes left.
Too many unethical people, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, but the reality is there are some people like that in this world, and some people you may not really recognize till you're bitten, right? Yeah. So we do need to be cognizant of the fact, to be aware and place some safeguards, hence maybe screening who you hire, references, and there's sometimes you can't really have those references depending on where the person is coming from, right? So I think there should always be some safeguards of some sort in industries and organizations to help us screen out, smoke out. And
yes,
then,
but if you've gone through 3 interviews, a smart person can figure that out. And
well, some people hide their true colors, sadly, right? It's only on the field, quote unquote, on the work side that you begin to see some, let's just say, they're changing their colors.
I have a business relationship with someone she thinks she's exemplary and brilliant, but she would take advantage of anyone as she could, but she still thinks that she's highly ethical. So if someone is inherently dishonest, you can't train that out of them. That's their character. You can fire their ass real fast, but
interesting. So on that note, with 1 minute left, thank you so much for sharing your perspectives. I really appreciate your thoughts. So I know we only have 1 minute left. Could you quickly tell the viewers where they can reach you or access your services?
Sure. The fastest way would be to email me, which is alice@alicewheaton.com. ALICEWHEATON.com. I think it's in 2 or 3 weeks, I'm going to be doing a 3-hour morning training on sales.
Mhm.
And it would be good for someone who has got a good product or service, and they know it's a good product or service, and they're frustrated and mad with themselves because they're not marketing it or selling it.
Okay.
And so feel free to connect with me and chat about that.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I see we're out of time. Thank you for joining us yet again. And so for you viewers, you know where to find me, and join us next time, same place, for another episode of The Dancing Negotiator with Dr. Cheryl Okoli, DHA. So I'd like to leave you with this note. Remember that you are needed in this world to be a solution. Be the best that you can, and do not rob the world of a precious gem, you. Goodbye, and have a splendid day.